computer. Share screen. Okay. And all right, so we are going to talk about teaching beyond poses. I know it's maybe a little bit premature because we haven't practiced teaching poses enough, I don't feel like, but we will get there. But I want to introduce these ideas because I want you to start gathering thoughts and being more aware. I know you've done this kind of work before, Manny, but I want to encourage you, Kyla, to kind of start thinking about this, adding this to your training, the personal work that you do as a teacher trainee. So I know you've been practicing the poses, practicing your on your mat, which is wonderful. So now you can start thinking about how do you teach beyond the poses. And I'm taking it from this book that I got for Christmas, actually, from the owner of the studio where I teach. It's called Teaching Beyond the Poses, a practical workbook for integrating themes, ideas, and inspiration into your class. So if you're interested, it's on Amazon, and there's the title and what it looks like. All right. So first of all, before I get into that discussion, why do you think it's important to create a theme?
A theme for like the class?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, my initial, thought is just to set intentions, I guess. To have like a focus. Um, so like just draw the energy in a bit. So, you know, when you're, in your life and going through stuff, when you get like, into class and on the mat, you can feel you could not, you know, forget necessarily those things, but just put your mind onto something specific.
Yeah, you want to feel like it's a different experience. It's you're walking out in from your day and you're going to have a yoga type of experience, which is different from a regular exercise class. The themes make you a yoga teacher as opposed to a yoga instructor or just a yoga cure. You're teaching more than movement, and we've talked about that before, especially when we were talking about philosophy, right? So we're kind of getting now into more of the practical tools that can help you create those themes for your class. Oh, and a little bit more about this book is it has places for you to write down your ideas, and then it has actually some theme suggestions and how to implement it. So, but we're going to talk about the first half, which is how to find your voice. So you've probably been in a yoga class and heard something that really caught your attention or made you kind of get out of your body or out of your head, kind of took you to a different place where you like insight. I know I've had quite a few of those. I think we've all had those moments that not only uplift you and inspire you, but they keep you wanting to come back to class because it gave you something really meaningful that sometimes even change your life or turn your thoughts, in a more positive way. I know that's happened to me, used to happen to me quite regularly when I was first practicing. So how do we as teachers find that way of teaching? So here are the ideas from this book. These are the different chapters. Words are powerful. Theming makes your class. What do others say? The art of emulation. Authenticity and the seat of the teacher. Practice your words until you believe them. Repetition is comfortable. And finding inspiration and what to do when you're not inspired. So we'll begin with words are powerful. So how you cue a class sends a message more than just put your foot here or put your hands there or move here or move there, right? There's something in your tone. There will be something in your um, emotions, something in your confidence, something in the way that you yourself are grounded or not grounded, or centered or not centered, that will communicate something to who you're speaking to, right? Of course, we need to know how to teach them how to move first. So that's a basic skill. We start with that. But then we hope to be moving, meaning moving them emotionally. Um, where's the word? I'm looking for a word. Moving them emotionally. There's a word I'm looking for. Piquing their interest or kind of um, stimulating. That's what I'm trying to find. Stimulating their mind, right? Because you're speaking more than just how to move their body. You also are hoping that you'll have a deeper effect. So how do you structure that? How do you use those words? How do you create that theme with your words, of course? So you begin with a theme, you explain it through the movement. So you're going to use the movement, use the flow, use the sequencing to reinforce the theme or to teach the theme. And then you want to revisit the theme at the end. You want to kind of seal it so that the learning makes a full circle. So you're reinforcing. And then the quote from the book says, saying beautiful, gently provocative, wise, and loving things while students move can shift them, transform them, and offer them relief. All right, any thoughts on that? Do you remember any particular phrases that are meaningful to you, either that you've heard or that you say? Do you have any mantras that are always coming up in your mind? Any mantras like from your parents or maybe someone important to you? I know my dad used to always say, patience is a virtue, although he was not always a very patient man. I think he said that because he knew how important it was, and he hoped that we had more patience than he did.
There's one that and I think I think Bruce Lee said this. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just be like water.
Oh, I
So
remember that one. I've
I
seen that.
hear that a lot in my head or
And
in
what
my
does that mean to you?
well, for me, I guess it's because water is like powerful, but it's also like it flows. So, water can like so powerful, it can like cut through rocks, but it also, you could float on it. So to just, I guess, be like water is like,
Mhm.
both those things. So I know it's silly because,
No, it's not. It's
but,
not.
but it stuck with me when I heard that. Like, I think it was like an interview of his, like an old interview. And I remember watching it and I was
Yeah.
like, I
Right.
think water is like the element I feel most connected to. So, um, I would say that always, comes into my mind.
That's cool.
That'll just give me like strength or help me to, it gives me strength, but it also helps me to just relax.
Hmm.
It works both ways for me.
Oh yeah, that's the interesting thing. That's very interesting because it takes the shape of whatever container. That's something that I associate with water. And flowing to me, the idea of flowing means it's not stressful, it's not strenuous. There's that feeling of easiness to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. How about you, Manny?
Oh, uh, uh, when I'm teaching, I have three personas that I use. I'm a guru, sometimes I'm a coach, and the third one, sometimes I'm a cheerleader. A guru provides some wisdom into the class. The coach teaches skill, and the cheerleader is, you're their number one fan. So depending on the situation, I change my persona. So that's the way I do it.
That's
So I
awesome.
balance those three because you cannot always become a coach or always becoming a guru. So
Hmm.
so those three. So the
So
words that will come out depending on what persona you, you want.
right.
When you're a guru, you're a little bit philosophical. When you're a coach,
Yeah.
when you're a coach, you are teaching them the loading of their body for some poses. Some cues on alignment, stuff like that.
So what are
But
your sources of wisdom?
after living 70 years, it comes naturally to you.
Experience, right?
Yeah, experience. So yeah, I do not have. I just have a theme, but sometimes those words will come out.
Mhm. Do you ever
Naturally.
share like personal experiences, like these lessons that you learned by experience through
Yeah,
experience?
of course, of course. Like for
Yeah.
instance, we will be doing a flow. For example, the standing balances, particularly Warrior 3. And to inspire them, I'm telling them, I've been practicing for almost 10 years and cannot still perfectly pose because my knees are hurting. And
Mm,
I'm hoping you can do better than me. Stuff like that to inspire them. It doesn't matter how long you've been practicing, they're still struggling.
mm,
So I share those kind of struggles with my
mhm,
students. So don't worry if you are struggling.
mm.
I too am still struggling. Something like that.
Yeah, and that also
Because
comforts them.
remember, asana means comfort. Yeah, so it's comfortable seat. You have to have comfort. Asana means comfort.
Yeah, and that reminds them that you're also that you're it kind of helps them to feel like you're like them. And
Yes,
yeah,
and also vulnerable.
we're all learning. We're all working on it.
That,
We're all
maybe
practicing.
that is what the book is saying about authenticity. Because authenticity is something that is very getting to be rare now in this world.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about that, in fact, authenticity. Yeah.
And also when it comes to getting ideas, I use the three I's. Even before yoga, I call them imitate, innovate, then invent. Of
Hmm.
course, you have to start something somewhere. You just have to imitate some of the good ones, and then from there you innovate. You know.
Right. You can go off on
And then
your
maybe you
own
can invent.
and be creative on your
Yeah,
own. Yeah, so this
right.
next point says emulating our teachers. So when you hear something, the book suggests as a tool, when you hear something from a teacher that you write it down and that you expand on it and you personalize it. And
Yeah,
then it's okay to borrow from your teachers, but also to say, like, my teacher said this, or as my teacher says, because we want to acknowledge that we're part of a lineage. So like when something when I repeat something that Shiva Ray says, for example, my teacher, I will say Shiva Ray says, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And oftentimes you can trace teachers who train teachers based on their language. There'll be a similarity. And what's interesting is that, sometimes students at our studio, they'll say, "Oh, I could tell that this teacher had trained with you because of there's kind of some, they have kind of we have an influence on we have influences on our voice." So, and that's okay.
To me, mentioning your teacher
Hmm.
uh, is also a way of telling your students that learning is a continuing process.
Right, that you're also a
Like
student.
like them, like them, you're also learning
Hmm.
from each other, from your teacher. So the more you say I've learned from my teacher, it's a good way of also telling them that it's a process. It's
Hmm.
not a one thing event that you finish after the class. So
Yeah,
yeah, that is also one way of telling them to continue learning.
yeah, yeah. So it's okay to borrow from our teachers, honor the teachers that you when you use their words, and become aware sometimes you may repeat something and it just didn't feel right for you, and that's okay too. So then you'll know, well, this doesn't ring as true for me, even though when I heard it, it was meaningful. So you can almost sometimes by trial and error, you can um, own certain things, but then certain things you need to maybe let go. And then I always say you need to fill your cup, and we'll talk more about that later. And the book says, a quote from the book, its power lies in the elements beyond the poses, meaning yoga. The sense of connection, awareness, and union that comes from a complete practice. So when we bring in those words of wisdom and we address not just the physical, but beyond the physical, beyond the poses, then it makes it a more complete practice. Okay. Authenticity and the seat of the teacher. So this authenticity is interesting because I feel like it's been a buzzword like for the past few years. I think your generation, Kyla, talks about it, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how it's described, or what is it? How do people try to live the authentic
I
life?
feel like it could, be summarized by, I guess, the phrase like, oh, this is my truth. I'm living my truth. Or, if I hear that a lot. And like
Yeah.
my generation, it's like, oh, well, this is my truth. And it's, it can definitely come off at times as like, self-centeredness and a little bit, like, okay, there is a reality at the end of the day, I feel like, and maybe your truth kind of bends, that reality. So it can't, there's a fine line, I feel like, and maybe um the younger generation does, walk the fine line, sometimes crosses the fine line, but I think it's just because, in previous times you couldn't really live your truth, if that makes sense. Not as openly as you can now. I think people are kind of just pushing the boundaries, maybe just to, I feel like things will level off
Hmm.
eventually, but I feel like maybe they're just pushing a little farther just to make, more space,
Oh, that's
or
really wise. Yeah.
just to make it's almost just like maybe we know they're doing the most, maybe they're aware, we're doing the most right now, but I think it's just so that when things do level off, they'll level off to a more expanded version of, what was before.
Hmm.
Um, so maybe I think that's where I see, the authenticity
Hmm.
aspect of my generation is just like, people want to, live your truth, live their truth, you know, they want to, set their own boundaries and um I guess live more, genuinely to what they feel is right for their life as opposed to like what the world says their life should be.
Hmm.
Um
Or maybe what their parents or their,
yeah, just external factors basically,
I see. Or,
Yeah, but like I said, it can, at the same time, although you want to live from your own, truth, um your own like desires, it can come off sometimes like very self-centered minded when it's like the external factors are real though, you know,
Yeah.
and then other people are affected by
Hmm.
how you live your truth. And so it can, it's a little, dicey, but
Yeah.
I think it's just like, I think it's just part of just, I don't know, social progression, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it gets kind of confusing, I think, sometimes because it sounds arrogant.
Yeah.
It gets to sounding arrogant, like as if almost like a chip on your shoulder. Like, I feel like saying, nobody's making you
Yeah.
not be you.
Yeah.
You're okay. I'm fine with you. That's what I feel like.
Yeah.
It's almost like fighting a shadow enemy,
Yeah.
almost.
Hmm.
That's what me, I don't know if it's my generation that sees that, but that's how it feels sometimes.
Hmm.
No. Um, so what happened to Manny? Manny, are you still there? Can you hear us? Let me let me message him. Well, thank you for explaining that because I've heard it and I've seen it, and it's nice to hear, from your perspective what because you're in it
Hmm.
and you kind of get it. But it's also nice to hear that you see what's problematic about it. And
Yeah. I think it's when there's no balance, there's no consideration,
right.
that it's gone too far.
Yeah. See where he is. Okay, he's messaging me. Hold on, let me give him a moment. Don't want him to miss out. And I also feel like that uh, at some point the fences or the I don't want to use the word boundaries again because that means differently, but the rules
Hmm.
were almost they seemed kind of, some of them, not all of them, I mean they seemed kind of necessary
Hmm.
at some point. And then yeah, and but also like you weren't alive in the 90s. I think it was the 90s where it was all about materialism,
Hmm.
the same time as Material Girl. That was literally the song of that decade by Madonna. People were very material, and it was all about getting more stuff. I mean, I think in a way that, that was the ideology of the time, but I'm, oh, here he is. But I don't agree with it, right? So, I mean, I can see that you would want to push against that. And I also feel like the authentic language that your generation talks about actually has some merit, like um, repurposing things, or being thrifty, being kind of the opposite of that materialistic way
Hmm.
of thinking. Even just being nostalgic, like wanting to listen to long playing records. I feel like there's like a um, kind of a desire to return to simpler times. Is that true, do you think,
I would say so. I
of
think
your generation?
there's definitely a desire for like nostalgia. I feel like um
Why
I
do you
think
think that is?
our generation has lost so much because of how much change there's been just in our lifespan.
Hmm.
from, now we have these like little, this is like a supercomputer that we can just carry in our hand compared to, when we were kids, my parent, had flip phone that couldn't do anything. And so having like this type of just technology like readily available is, I know, and other, every generation has some advancements and stuff and a lot of change, but I feel like things have just changed so rapidly, I feel like, in our lifetime, that we do look for like the that feeling of like the nostalgia of old stuff. Like I love like old stuff too, because it's like, oh, it reminds me of a time when things are a little bit simpler.
Hmm.
Um, and even with just how social media has made socializing, it's like I don't even like to use my social medias because I don't know, it's almost like that's the part of me that doesn't want to change with the time, like I remember when I was younger and how I thought things would be when I was older, and it's not how I thought it would be. So sometimes, choosing to not be as involved in like the social media than, your peers is kind of just, I guess, my expression of that desire of nostalgia, or even just, I remember I said this thing. I was like, I love, because everything, you stream everything now,
Yeah.
and I remember, my cousins, they've never had to put in a DVD. And older people would say, oh, you never had to put in like a VCR, you know tape. Like that's what they'd say to me. But I think about my cousins, Mike and Eli, they've never had to put in a, a DVD. They don't know what it's like to have to wait to, what you have to watch like previews on the DVD that you bought. And you can't just click it and the movie just starts instantly.
Yeah.
And the way that they'll just switch between movies like all the time, like they'll start one and just switch it. It's like when I was younger, we had to take the DVD out and put it away, get the new one and restart it and try to skip through the thing, and it wouldn't let you. And,
Yeah.
it's like, I miss that. And I'll
Mm.
say stuff like, oh, sometimes I still like watching live TV because it makes me feel like when I was younger, and I can imagine there's other people watching at the same time as me, and maybe they're laughing too. But
Oh, yeah. Or
you
even
know, there is like that.
waiting for an episode.
Yeah, I'm like, oh,
Waiting for
I'm
an
watching it
episode
live. I'm gonna watch it live. Yeah.
once a week, right? That's when it
Yeah.
came out, the
That I
episode.
like, binge watching stuff,
Yes. Yes.
Didn't do that when we were younger unless they were having a TV marathon. But even then, you had to just sit there and watch it. Like you could pause it and, you know, play it on your phone. If
Yeah.
you'd have to run to the bathroom for like the bathroom break during the commercial, and like, we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, you could
There
just
is
take
a certain, yeah, there's a certain disconnect with that, right? People can be in the same room and watching totally different things at the same time.
Yeah, and that's definitely, it's like everyone's, that's the thing, why I liked watching like live TV, because I was like, oh, it feels like now everyone's just on their own time, because
Mm.
you can just do everything whenever you want it, however you want it. You can watch a show in the shower if you want, you know. And I know some people do that because it's like you can. So it's just different, and it's, different's not always better, or new is not always better. And so
Yeah.
I think people kind of want those like maybe more simple times. And
Yeah.
it's hard because social media is supposed to supposedly make us feel more connected, but at the same time kind of
Disconnects you too.
disconnects us. So it's,
Yeah.
sometimes it helps, it really does sometimes help, sometimes it helps, but sometimes it's just, more, it can be more bad than good at times, which it was hard.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to become discerning. And I really appreciate that you're more mindful, how much more mindful you are about it, because it can become it's so easy that it can just take over you. And um was I gonna say, I think that when it makes me think of pratyahara, to withdrawal of the senses, because when you when you have so much input right there, it's almost dulling. It's almost dulling. It almost dulls your mind because you can keep it pacified. You can keep it distracted so easily. So pratyahara, if you make media, social media, or even your phone use, or if you make that something that you withdraw from, you you can appreciate when you do bring input in, you can appreciate it more because you're not overloaded, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. I really loved hearing about all that. So,
Of course.
yeah. Did you get that, Manny? Are you with us?
Yes, of
Okay.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm fixing my internet connection. My God, it's fluctuating.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, Kyla had a lot of good thoughts to share about her generation. You know, the millennials and they're
Mhm.
they're kind of attracted to nostalgia because she was saying that life has changed so much in their generation that um, they want something simpler. They want things maybe a little bit more like how they used to be because they didn't have that experience. So, and also we were talking about authenticity. I think you heard that part. And then also social media and how and media in general can fill your mind so much that it's like you need to withdraw from it or put limits on it so that you can still have space in your own mind. So, oops, we lost him again. Darn it. Okay. So, anyway, let me go on with this topic. He'll just have to, I guess, watch it in the recording. So, practicing your words, just like what we've been doing just now, talking about these ideas can help you speak them in a class setting. So, for example, if you were to talk about pratyahara, if you were to use that as a theme, now you have a collection of thoughts that you can use to describe it, right? Kyla, don't you think? And you can write it out. You can use your journaling to kind of flush out those ideas, get the words to put to those themes, and then discussing them and sharing it. Actually, the book suggests that you can share it on social media, like those little quotes. Sometimes I like to put quotes on my Facebook page. Some things come to my mind and I'll just write them down. I'll just post it and put it out there. And it's very interesting to get responses. Like people will either agree or they'll elaborate on it or they'll appreciate it. So I think that's maybe one positive use of media if you're going to use it at all as part of your yoga teaching. You don't have to, but if you do. All right, and the book says choose themes that interest you, surprise you, intrigue you, or excite you, ones that feel like guideposts in your life. Like that quote from Bruce Lee about water. That seems like a guidepost for you. So take note of those kinds of thoughts and ideas. All right. Repetition is comfortable. So sometimes you may begin to feel like you're saying the same thing over and over again, and that's okay. That's helpful. I feel like one thing that I've said probably a million times is breathe. So sometimes it can get a little tiring, but it helps them, it reminds them because they do forget. but also certain themes, as if you repeat them, you can find different ways of saying them, like flow like water. You can have that change, the way that you say it as you learn more about it. Lessons have a way of changing over time as well. For you, they'll mean, maybe flowing like water will mean something different to you next month. So we can keep repeating the same lessons, but maybe presenting them in a little different way. Hi, Manny, welcome back. And also, on a practical note, they don't always hear what you're saying. They may zone out sometimes in your class, or they may be so focused on something in their body that they don't catch everything that you say. So it's okay to repeat things. And then the quote says, with too much consistency, there's no growth. With too much variety, there's no stability. So you kind of have to have a balance of repeating things, but also keeping things new. What else was I going to say? I feel like as I've taught through the years, there's familiar threads that have stayed throughout the whole time. And you'll find your own set of principles that you can return to over and over again. Like for me, I didn't used to be as aware of mindfulness and being in the present, but that has become one of my threads. In the beginning, when I was first teaching, it was a lot more about self-expression and appreciating movement and being in my body, being in our bodies. And now it's become more about the mind increasingly the longer I've been teaching. So you may find that happens for you. And that's okay. That's exciting because you're evolving too as a person and as a teacher. All right, finding inspiration and what to do when you're not inspired. So I have to admit, some days I don't feel like I share a lot of wisdom. There's just maybe nothing's coming to mind, or I may have just come into class from a very stressful situation and I have to, get focused and get present. Honestly, I use that opening meditation at the beginning of class to center myself. So that helps me get to my foundation, my base, so that I'm almost always, no matter what's happened before I got to class, or no matter what's happening in my life in general, I always have a foundational place to start from. So that opening meditation, when we're just breathing together, if I need to be quiet for a little bit and find my own breath, I'll do that. And then, speaking to the class, helping them find their own center. That's my starting point. So that becomes consistent from day to day, no matter what's going on, right? So we have to remember that teachers are human. We're living real lives. We have real experiences. We have real relationships. We have real challenges, just like everybody else. It would be wonderful if, we've eaten right, we've gotten enough sleep, we feel peaceful, there's no conflict in our life, and we can come into a class and be this, kind of ethereal, beautiful being that we have been inspired by other teachers, right? But most of us are just human. So we have to cut ourselves some slack. We all have off days, and we have to remember to have compassion for yourself. And just like we want to accept our students where they are, we also have to accept ourselves where we are. But have those key standards that you adhere to. So there's you absolutely you don't bring anger, right? You have to manage that anger. You don't bring bitterness, right? You don't bring um, angst usually into your class, whatever is going on. So you have your foundation. Um, Something you can also do is make a gratitude list. Some things that you're always grateful for, and you can always fall back on those. For me, I'm always grateful for breath, for my physical body and what it can do. I'm always grateful for um, who I am and my own abilities, not just physically, but as a person. I'm grateful for, could be grateful for sunshine, could be grateful for food, whatever fills your heart. Have that little list. And I find that as well. There are threads that I will refer to repeatedly over time that come from that gratitude list. Like, for example, one of them that I just love, that trees emit oxygen and that they use carbon dioxide. I think you mentioned this before, Manny. And we breathe what they exhale, and they inhale what we exhale. I always love that idea. And I've mentioned that several times through the years. So there, if when there's nothing that you've planned that's coming together, have these kinds of um, nuggets that you keep in your heart that you can refer to. And another skill is to name your emotions. So let's say that you've come in and you've just had a conflict with maybe a member of your family, and you're at seated meditation at the beginning. Acknowledge to yourself, I'm stressed, or I'm upset, or I'm sad, or I'm frustrated. So do some self-care and give your own inner being space to be what you are. And then you can gently, it's still there maybe, but then you can kind of speak over it and then turn your attention towards your class so that it doesn't come out unintentionally. So that it doesn't come out in a negative way because you've given yourself space. Something else to continue to find inspiration is to take classes and be a student, breathe. And then the quote from the book, let yourself off the hook when you feel you have nothing to say to inspire others. Okay, but we'll talk more about finding inspiration here. Let's see that. Go here. So activities to kind of fill your cup, like I said earlier. Feed your mind with truth. Feed your heart with love. Feed your soul with beauty. Read, write, and journal. Find ways to express yourself. Choose good sources to read from. Find people to love. Express love to others as much as you can. Soften your heart. Like one thing that I found that's very interesting that my mom does, when she wants love, she gives it. So instead of saying, give me a hug or give me a kiss, she'll call to me and she'll give me a kiss. But what I sense and what I know is that she actually wants to be loved. But the way that she accomplishes that feeling is to give it. Does that make sense, you guys? So, you know, find people to love and express it. All right, and I'm going to go backwards now. Something that I found to be really valuable is to be really tuned in to what's going on around you. Not meaning like your proximity, but like the world. Like if there's a major event, um, what was it? Like the pandemic, for example, when the pandemic happened, and kind of tune into how people might be feeling, and then learn to empathize with that in a professional way, and find those principles or those uh, yogic ideas that can help. There's almost always something, or even if it's not a yogic, something else that you've heard somewhere else. Be aware of the stations of life. Like, be aware of that mom that comes into class and what her life is like. Be aware of that student. Be aware of that teenager who may be having an identity crisis. Be aware of, the retired person who's just now getting to do things that they want to do for themselves. Um, be aware of the really stressed out executives. Probably know about that, Manny, right? How they're feeling. So it's really amazing, really, the how much you can put into being a yoga teacher. You you can be this, this encompassing human, um, and just to take in these different people and learn to empathize with them in a professional way. And the first place to start with is just by holding space for them, seeing them and holding space for them. If you
You
can,
know,
yeah.
empathy is an overused word in a yoga class. But
Uh-huh.
sometimes I'm telling my teacher, how do you express your empathy? How will the students feel your empathy?
Mhm.
What values or what action or what behavior you should have to show empathy? Because empathy is somewhat abstract too, because it's an internal thing for the person, feeling you know, feeling the empath, being an empath. So how do you express that? What demeanor or what behavior you should have for the students to feel that you have empathy?
I think it varies depending on the situation, but from my experience, just like first seeing the person and trying to feel what they feel, oftentimes can guide me to how to respond. Because if I know how they feel, if I feel I know how they feel, and I know what would help me feel better if I was feeling that way, then that's what I would do. But there's also, that's what I would say or do. There's also little things that I would do. For example, if there's somebody who's struggling in a class, maybe they are it's they're new and they're not very strong, for example, or something like that. I find ways to maybe just a hand on the shoulder to reassure them, to comfort them. Um, Sometimes I'll practice right next to that person if they're struggling with something. I'll go right next to them on the floor, right next to them on their mat and move with them. Oh, or just words of comfort. Um, you know, uh, it really depends on the situation. If, yeah, give me a scenario.
I'm just uh wondering sometimes, you know, empathy is a very broad.
Broad
It's
term.
very broad, and sometimes people they feel that, but they don't show it that much
Mm.
because it's not the action that makes you. That's that empathy is not through action, but how the person feels about another human being.
Mhm. Well,
So
but that,
sometimes very hard to show because sometimes it can be interpreted as sympathy or you're just
yeah.
empathy is different. So sometimes a lot of people are talking about empathy, not really understanding that empathy is something that is you. You don't really express it. You don't really. Uh, so sometimes I just tell them you should not work hard about that empathy. You just have to be patient with your students. If they're struggling, be patient. If you think
Right.
they're overdoing it, just approach them and so don't be so don't because in yoga they're always saying empathy, empathy, but
Uh-huh.
empathy is a feeling of the feeling of the person towards another human being. It's very hard to express that.
Yeah, it's feeling what they're feeling.
Yes,
And
but sometimes very difficult to express that. Yeah.
well, so that's like the start. That gives you information. So when you think you know how they feel, or you sense how they feel, or you feel how they feel, so empaths absorb the feelings without meaning to. They just receive it, right? So once you receive it, you have to know what to do with it. And that takes practice. And that's why I practice empathy in a professional way. So
In the Christian, when you say you're an empath, you
huh?
absorb the suffering of others. In the Christian world, when
Yes.
you say they say that you're an empath, you feel the sufferings of other people.
Hmm.
Yeah, in a yoga class, you will also feel the same, and it's very tiring. More than the cues, more than the. It's when some people, in my experience, some people are struggling on a pose, but in advanced classes that I have, some are being obsessed by the pose.
Hmm. So
you know,
then
you know that
you would
you feel
speak
that.
differently to them, right? You would speak differently to them between the
Yeah,
person that's struggling and the person that's got ego going on. If
yeah,
they have
obsession.
ego going on, yeah, then you speak differently to them if you can tell what they're feeling. So being able to tell the difference between the two, that's the work of an empath. That's that's gives you information. It helps you know, okay, what do I think is going on? What do I feel is going on? And then that helps you know what to do. So how would you deal with somebody who's got ego going on?
Yeah,
Right? It's different than someone who's just struggling. Someone who's struggling, you will be encouraging and comforting, right? Somebody who has ego, maybe you would, I don't know, how do you deal with ego? I ah, I tend to leave them be or maybe encourage them to, I don't know, I tend to honestly, I don't know how to deal with someone who's got ego very well. How do you deal with it, Manny?
yeah. You know what? Maybe if I still have that book, The Courage to Teach by Parker. He's talking about it's very daunting to be to teach, because you're sharing part of yourself, or even the whole of yourself. So in that book, especially among adults, because unlike Kyla, she's still teaching tabula rasa kids, so it's a different scenario. But in our world, we're teaching adults, mostly adults,
Mhm.
and they have their own biases, they have their own prejudices, they have their own hang-ups, their own, and their own experience or even emotions at that moment of when you're teaching. So
Mhm.
sometimes, it's really daunting. Sometimes that is what sometimes I'm a little bit insecure when it comes to those things. You know, when I see those kind of feelings, because if you're an empath, you will feel all those things, those varying emotions in
Yeah.
the class. So uh, I'm just expressing this because
Yeah.
to me, my only solution there is just to be authentic. Just show, your own. Don't be afraid to show your own vulnerability, your own insecurity.
Mhm.
That you don't have all the answers that they want. If they're struggling and you have done everything and you cannot really help them,
Mhm.
just admit, I myself
Yeah.
is having trouble with that. So to me, the vulnerability, because in that book he was talking about the vulnerability of teachers, some
Yes.
fear of the teachers and they have to share their knowledge. So I heeded this advice: be vulnerable like them.
Yeah. When it comes to a person with ego, there's a principle of equanimity. You're friendly towards the happy, you're compassionate towards the unhappy, you're indifferent to the evil, and you're friendly. I think it's friendly to the good. I'm probably butchering that. But going back to the person that has ego, to me, that person is suffering. So I usually respond with compassion, even if I don't do anything
If
or
you
say
have that
anything.
in
I
your
just,
in your in the States, I've been looking for that book. I just read a synopsis of that book. Parker Palmer, The Courage to Teach.
yeah, I don't know that book. I don't know that.
Yeah, maybe you can look it up also.
Yeah,
There,
I'll look it up.
I've been looking for that copy.
Mhm,
Uh, I tried Amazon.
mhm.
Sometimes they don't have it yet, but it's a good book about training adults or educating adults.
Oh, okay. The courage to teach.
Because most of our learning on teaching is all pedagogic, like what Kyla is doing is a pedagogic teaching. But
Right.
andragogic teaching is a really a challenging one.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you have rogue students.
Oh
Have you
yeah.
encountered students? Huh?
Oh yeah.
What do you
My
do to them
my
when
favorite
they're going?
one, my favorite one, and my favorite most challenging one was a transvestite, a male dressed in a miniskirt and a bikini top in my yoga class. And my greatest challenge was keeping the other students from seeing too much.
Distracted, getting distracted. Yeah,
Yeah, so my that was my greatest challenge. I
yeah.
yeah. So I had to turn, huh? Oh, I had to turn their direction where they face. You need to bring the computer.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
You sure?
Yes, it's fine.
How are you going to do it?
I'll just look at their notes.
Where do you have them? Okay, okay. Bison. So yeah, that was my greatest challenge was having people turn a certain way for certain poses so that they wouldn't see his under his skirt. That was my greatest challenge.
To me, that will be entertaining. But to me, it's a funny situation that we should all entertain ourselves. My greatest challenge is having a bipolar person in my class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is really difficult handling, especially when he's so on his up and up. Sometimes she will anticipate the moves. That
Oh, yeah, you
she
were
will she
talking
will
about that the other day.
huh?
You were talking about that the other day. What if they anticipate or they go to the moves before you cue them?
So when I see them anticipating it, I will change my my
Oh,
mind and make a different move. Let us see.
there you
So
go.
a bit naughty. But when
Yeah.
I see that person anticipating my next
Ah,
pose, I will change the pose.
there you
Correct?
go. Keep them guessing. That's a good one. All right.
Anyway,
So anyway, yeah. So being aware of what's going on in the world is helpful. Like sometimes we will come in and there's been a tragedy, like, oh, maybe a shooting at a school or something like that. And so people are going to come in with a certain set of emotions. So that's a good time to just be really calming and really comforting and really peaceful, helping them get centered, helping them to remember to have compassion for themselves, just guiding them to a feeling of peace as best as you can. So the quote by Leslie Kamadoff in 2016, actually on social media, he said, all yoga educators, stress reduction is now the world's #1 industry. Let's do what we do best, stay centered, and offer safe havens. All right, I did that one already. Analogies. So analogies are a great way to teach. They're powerful teaching tools. So we're going to look for connections. We're going to look for how a physical pose is a representation of some kind of spiritual principle. Be aware of similarities. Think across the layers, the koshas. Think of the different layers of our being and how do we connect understanding between those different layers. Analogies describe relationships. Analogies help us understand and remember things better. When we have an analogy that relates to a complex idea, and the analogy it's being compared to something simple, it's easier to remember what's complicated. And it also helps us to understand something that's complicated. Okay, so let's see. Let's practice. Like, think of a pose and relate it to a principle. So let's say Warrior 2. What kind of principle can we relate to Warrior 2?
principle in yoga philosophy, or
Anything, yeah. Philosophy or just life lesson or a virtue or a
yeah,
life
very good.
value.
You mentioned about warrior two. I always use that to gauge
Mhm.
a person's attitude towards life.
Mhm.
You see some people who are very, very aggressive in their pose in a warrior two. In general, I'm not saying it's universal. If their body is moving towards the front, leaning towards the front, you will see that these persons are maybe type A. And it validated me. Very assertive. If that
Oh.
person is a little leaning back to the back leg, and
Mhm.
sees a reserve. Very, very few people can really center their torso over their hips in a warrior pose. Because it's so simple, they think that it's a simple one. And some people, they're having, although they're very good at lizard, but how come when it comes to warrior two, they don't lower their hips? Why? But when you ask them to do, say, lizard, which is a hip opener, they can really open their hips. They can have their elbows down. But when it comes to warrior, the warrior ideal warrior pose is when your hips are at the same level as your knee. So you open up a lot. And some of them, they do not. Why do you think that's so?
Sometimes it's either oh, someone hit a pole. Oh darn, Kyla. So you have no power?
Yeah, I
Oh
don't have
man.
power, but I'm trying to use my hotspot on my phone. I
Oh,
just don't know if but there's not really good service here. So if my connection's not very good, I don't know if I don't know if it'll be able to carry the Zoom, and I don't have any lights in
oh,
here.
okay.
So
Darn.
Oh,
I'm
you still have the rains there? You still have those heavy rains coming in California?
The
It's
rain.
not even raining. Someone hit a pole.
Mhm.
Oh,
Um,
A power
and it was,
pole.
I don't hope they're okay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so we don't have power. Now I really don't know when the power will be back on since they
Oh,
kind of.
Later on, you will lose battery and you will,
yeah, I know, right?
you
I know. So anyway, back to your question, why don't they go down as low? It probably is either strength in your hips. So strength and flexibility are not, they don't necessarily coexist. You could be very flexible and be weak. You could be very strong and not be flexible. So if they can go into a lizard, meaning they're flexible enough, they may not be strong enough in the hips, the
Mhm.
thigh or the thighs, or their knee might
Yeah.
not allow them to go down that low. So those are just physiologically, that's what I think might be going on. But as far as relating a pose to a principle, so we're talking about analogies now, because they're really helpful to teach, used as a teaching tool. And so we're practicing um,
My,
creating
my, my,
analogies. So if you were to
my problem
relate,
with my problem with the students when they do not take the Warrior 2, the Warriors so seriously, because they always think the Warriors are just preparatory to the next post. No? So usually we use that as a way to enter into other more challenging poses.
Mhm,
And sometimes I emphasize to them that you have to be serious about your Warriors because there's so many things happening there, and in the next moves that you will be doing, especially when we're going to our peak post, a lot of things are happening.
mhm,
So take it seriously. Now, I notice many practitioners they don't really take this poses seriously, the warriors or variation. They
mhm,
think that it's only a transition to the next pose,
mhm.
to more challenging ones. So,
So
but
the
when I
if I
be
were
more
to
serious,
relate,
sometimes I let them marinate in that pose and let them stay there until
yeah,
they
so
can.
they can feel it and
Yeah.
pay attention to it. So if I were to relate that behavior that you're talking about right now to a principle, I would say, let's be in the moment.
Yeah.
Be in your warrior two. And
Under the
remember,
concept of Vyasa and Vairagya,
is that
give
what it,
some effort but not too much. But the opposite of Vyasa and Vairagya.
oh, yeah, I
Is it?
remember you talking about those before. So you could use that principle. You could use that as a way to teach them to be in the pose longer and to be more present in the pose. I would probably talk about being in the moment and being enjoying each moment of the journey and not just the destination. So that's one of those
Yeah.
principles, right? Those ideas. So that's um, what I'm asking for in this first exercise, pose to principle, is let's take a pose like, let's say, tree pose. What principle can we use? Can we use tree pose to teach with?
It's about balance, isn't it?
Balance, right? Yeah, that's the usual one. Yeah. So you're in tree pose and you can talk about balance. You can talk about balance in their daily life. You can talk about balance in how they spend their time. You can talk about balance in relationships. So there's a lot of ideas you can pull in while they're in tree pose. Meantime, they're holding it, and you're talking about something that they can learn from and feel a physical lesson about. They can feel the physical lesson. So it reinforces the lesson, but it also reinforces the pose. They work together. Yeah, that makes sense, guys. Okay,
Yeah.
so anatomical idea to a spiritual truth. This one is so fascinating, and I just mentioned this one because I have a specific example, and so I'm sorry about that, but it's just so interesting to me because I keep finding more lessons the more I learn about anatomy. So for example, we're going to be learning about the anatomy trains next. and connective tissue, how everything connects. Um, that's a spiritual truth. Everything in nature is connected. We are all connected as humans. Um, we're connected to each other. Our past is connected to our present. How we live today is connected to how our posterity will live. So there's, what we choose to do, how we choose to live our life right now will affect our children someday. So that's one example. And as you learn more about anatomy, let your mind be open to those kinds of lessons that we can learn from nature. Nature has those lessons that we can learn from as well. How animals behave, how the seasons behave, how plants behave. Yeah.
In the practice of bhakti yoga,
Mm-hmm.
the devotion type of yoga,
Mm-hmm.
they say that every cell in our body has its own mind and its own, you know. So they
It
say that
has
the
intelligence.
practice is
It has
going all
intelligence.
the way to the cellular level. Huh?
It has intelligence. I think you mean intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I read about. I'm not practicing bhakti yoga. I just read about it and it's really
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
haven't had the opportunity to practice that.
Oh, maybe I can lead you in that sometime.
Bhakti yoga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. One
Yeah.
time we can have a class on
We'll,
bhakti
we'll,
yoga.
we'll work on that. Yeah. All right. Concrete to abstract, meaning so it's another way of saying what we've been talking about. Having a concrete idea, like a pose, and relating it to something abstract, something material to something immaterial. And that's kind of what I mean by teaching across the doshas and being aware of how they can relate to each other, or the koshas, sorry, the layers of ourself, our physical body, our mental body, our emotional body, our breath body. Create a two-way road to learning. That's what I was just saying a moment ago. Okay, so like the pose and the principle inform each other. For example, the pose teaches you the principle and the principle teaches you the pose. Because when you have meaning attached to a physical experience, you remember it better. It's the learning is more in depth. And I think that's it. Yep. All right.
There is another book that I'm reading about teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot the name of the author, but the title of the book is Teach People, Not Just Poses.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you teach them to feel they're becoming aware of their body, their emotion at that moment, so that in every pose, they have that sort of feeling that will make them more be able to at least succeed. No?
Yeah, and oh, I'm gonna share this with Kyla. Just hold on. Yeah, what was I gonna say? Hold on, I'm doing two things at once. Hold on. Sorry, can you repeat what you said, Manny? About teaching the person?
Yeah, the book is about teach people, not poses. That's the title of the book. She's
Right,
saying that most of the time we teach the yoga because we're so focused on the asana practice that there is more to yoga than just the asanas.
right. Yeah.
So the frame of mind of really body-mind connection should be there should be more attention in that you try to incorporate that concept in every movement that you make them. So that's what he's saying.
Mhm.
So teach poses, teach people, not poses. That's the title
Right.
of the book.
And part of teaching people is what we were talking about earlier, which is having space for them, knowing who they are, knowing where they are in their lives, in the day, in the moment, and that empath quality, being open to receive information from them in when they walk into your class, so that you are teaching them, you are talking to them, because you know them, you know who they are, as best as you possibly can. Yeah. Okay. So that was a good discussion. Sorry we missed you, Kyla. Um, I'll show you these we had. I think you left, we lost you here. No, we
Yeah.
talked about this, right? So here, finding what's, did you,
Oh, we got through this
you
too.
got through this? This one is the one you
Uh,
missed.
I think we missed this one, but
This one is really super interesting. So it's,
oh, I think I was here. You were kind of mentioning the pandemic and
yeah, okay,
yeah.
good. Oh,
Okay.
here, this is the one you
Oh,
missed.
I
Yeah.
was here too, so
Oh,
maybe
good. Well, you didn't miss very much. Oh, just talking
okay.
about
I think I just missed this last one. Yeah.
analogies. Okay,
Okay.
yes. Looking for connections, be aware of similarities, think across the layers, the koshas of ourself, which I mentioned earlier. They're powerful. Analogies are powerful teaching tools. They describe relationships, they help us understand and remember principles and ideas. And they relate the simple to the complex, which is my favorite part about analogies, is you use a simple analogy to teach something that's complicated.
Hmm.
So like a simple tree pose to teach the concept of balance, not just physically. You get them in the pose physically and you get there. We learn how to do that. And then after that, you teach the principle of the concept.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then you got it when we were here already. All right.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Since it's actually almost 5:30, we have just 30 minutes left.
Oh, the power turned on. Yay.
Oh, your power went on. Okay, I was gonna say maybe we shouldn't practice because you have no power. But let's go ahead and get ready real quick and we'll just have a half an hour practice. Okay, so go ahead and get your mats out and stuff, and we'll start. Let me pause this recording. Let me go check on everybody out there, and then I'll be right back in 2 minutes.